welcome in on a Wednesday's Maize and Blue Review. Good afternoon, Michigan football. Hope you're having a great one as we kick this one off. And I got to say, last night it was a little weird watching the Pistons win their game against the Miami Heat, where the Miami Heat called a timeout and they didn't have one. And if you're a Michigan fan, you'll recall the early 90s championship game when Chris Webber called a timeout, and Jalen Rose was out there on the floor. Guess who was at the game last night? Jalen Rose. The only thing that would have been better is if Chris Webber and Jalen Rose, maybe the whole Fab Five, if they would have been there, but certainly, Rose, Webber, probably it would have been better because he was actually the one that called the timeout. But still, having Jalen Rose, Jalen goes to a lot of Pistons games, but I don't ever remember it happening in a pro game. I don't know if it's happened in a college game since, so it doesn't happen very often. And then for it to happen with Jalen Rose there, it was odd, but it also, fun, I guess. All right. So the Pistons won, and it's a long enough memory, a negative memory, where you could at least deal with it, where it's not hitting you over the head with some kind of negativity, which is a good place to lead us right into today with Michigan football. You always want to think about where you're at right now. And where you're at right now is smack dab in the middle of a bye week. And for Michigan, they went so high last year. They went all the way to the very top. And now they're not exactly at the bottom, but that's how it feels. And heck, they've got 2 games to go. Who knows what's going to happen there? So it's tough if you're a Michigan fan emotionally after having been able to win the championship, now having to deal with the transition and then sitting here in a bye week. I mean, how do you deal with it? And if I was just watching Khalil Mullings, who was available for the media today, and he was asked why he didn't play against Indiana, and it took him like a minute, literally a minute before he answered the question. It was like, why didn't you play in the first half against Indiana? And it was somewhat like this. Really? But if you want to, and you can deal with anything and everything, you want to know about everything. So I get it, but at this point, getting upset at the coaching staff because of that, I've already dealt with that myself. Maybe you have not, so it's fresh to you, and you're ready to. It's not even piling on. You're ready to just deal with it now. I've kind of dealt with all of that from this last week and how the coaching's been going, and I am staying present with this bye week, but I'm also, looking ahead as well. I was thinking about these last 2 games, and does Northwestern have a better chance at upsetting Michigan than Michigan has at upsetting Ohio State? That was the question that I asked myself. And the first thing that I thought was Northwestern has a better chance at upsetting Michigan, because Michigan, whatever wherever they're at, you know what you've seen, and Northwestern's not a good team at all. But then you look at Ohio State, both games on the road, and it is the rivalry. You could put that in there, and you could say, oh, it's Michigan. It's more likely that Michigan pulls the upset because they're in Ohio State's heads. No, that's not a bad one. That's not a bad argument. In fact, that's the argument that I like the best. Michigan has a little success against Ohio State, and Ohio State's been waiting for 3 years. They're so worked up while their fans are all liquored up and ready for, this bloodletting, and then Michigan, it stays with them, and they tighten up. So you could make that argument, but I think it's Northwestern. Northwestern has a little success against this Michigan team. It could be that way too, but that is kind of where we're at. in the season. You might say, that's a silly hypothetical. That's not even an argument I want to think about. Of course, it's Northwestern's not going to beat Michigan. And you could say maybe by the same token, there's no way Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. That's kind of where it's at. I mean, it is Michigan football. And I believe that Michigan will beat Northwestern, and they'll likely lose to Ohio State. So, I mean, we're talking about anything can happen on any given Saturday. Now, yeah, could Michigan go out, beat Northwestern, and then go down and upset Ohio State? Yes, that could happen. And that, you could just say, "Wow, you're living in dreamland." It's okay. It's a bye week. I think it's okay to just kind of dream and think, "Wow, that would be nice," until you actually have to deal with it. Deal with an L again. Why not? Think about maybe this team can go out, get a victory against Northwestern, and then go down and beat Ohio State. Hey, all the things that I have said about this coaching staff and you have thought and probably said yourself, then it'd be a lot different. Be sitting here with a whole different perspective this season if that would happen. Those are things that I'm not expecting to happen, but we're talking about here on this Wednesday. So how about that? That was the opener and of this show. What's going on right now? What's next for Michigan? And currently talking about Michigan football. And you get to this point, and there's a thought about one of the coaches just play the young guys, get ready for next year. And there's a little bit of a balancing act there. You want to put all of your thought and energy into beating Northwestern. You have to think about what kind of team that you had. You think about not last year, but the year before with Jim Harbaugh heading into the season. Jim Harbaugh knew that Michigan had a super easy non-conference schedule and that he could play around. That, sure, he wasn't talking about we're overlooking, UConn and Hawaii. And of course he doesn't say that. But he knew that he could go out there and have the battle royale with J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara. And if it was a different situation, I don't think that Sharon Moore, when he's sitting around with his staff, says, guys, we're going to have our diligence with Northwestern, but we're practicing for Ohio State. We're putting something in. Half of this practice is going to be Ohio State. They're not in position to do that. I think that would be a mistake if they went about it that way. And they want to put all year long, if you're telling me that they take one of the periods and they commit something to Ohio State and they're going to do it again, well, yeah, I get that part. But I'm talking about thinking that you've got it as a staff. They never say that we've got this one in the bag. But, yeah, we got this one, so our attention is going to be so much on working with Ohio State. That's a little tricky for this team because they could lose to Northwestern. And then, if that happens, I just talked about what a positive ending of the season it could be with 2 wins and how you would all think about that, how I would think about it myself. But then there's the side of it where they lost 2 and you thought maybe you were at rock bottom, but no, it's one thing I've always found with sports is that you might think you're at rock bottom and then you peel it off and no, you can always go further down. There's depths there. So likely neither of those 2 things are going to happen. Michigan's not going 0-2. Michigan's not going 2-0. They're going to go 1-1. So that's it. And that's what's going on right now. And in terms of playing the young guys, that's why you can't get too, you can, if this game gets out of reach, I don't think it's going to happen 30-0. You're in the third quarter. Well, then can some of the younger guys, it's just like a preseason at that point. But I don't think that these guys can plan for any of that And so that's where I'm thinking right now about Michigan. Now, before I start talking about what's next for this team, I like to go and look through the feedback. And Scott has thrown some feedback up here right off the bat. And he says Moore was a great assistant coach and offensive coordinator. This season, he's been the worst new coach in the country. Yeah, well, that goes in the category, Scott, of what I was talking about. You're kind of, I don't know if you're dwelling on it. I think it's true. So I don't know what good it does. Like I said, I have that same kind of feeling myself, but every time I come on here, I'm not just going to take Sharon Moore and start smacking him over the head. He's done the job that he's done this to this point. I haven't liked it. Nobody's liked it. And then there we are. A-Train saying there's definitely something going on between the players and the coaches. Well, you're right, A-Train. When you have a football program and you treat it like it's the Pentagon and everything's classified, and that you have a long-standing tradition of treating anybody who wants to find out anything that's going on with the program, like the media that is asking questions, and you have an adversarial relationship with them that goes back to the late 60s, then we're not dumb. When the coaches try sliding things in and, this isn't for public consumption, we're keeping things, in between the wall. And then you got a player going out there with his eyes wide open and he can't answer a question. We all weren't born yesterday, but we saw it. We saw that how the personnel was deployed over these last two games, and we all smell the rat there. We all knew. We all said something about it, and that goes on. That goes over on the side of the ledger of not a good thing or not a good move by the head coach. Go ahead and put that over on the ledger. I'd already put that over on that side of the ledger. The dealing with Mullings, the rotation at quarterback in week one, how he's dealt with the offensive line. I mean, all of those kind of things are over on the right side and of the ledger, which is the left side's the good, and then you've got the other side. Scott talking about Dono. Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards has not, his ceiling has not been maximized here at Michigan. That's disappointing. Tough player to call plays for because he can go 1 yard, 2 yard, 3 yards, 4 yards, -5 yards, 50, 2 yards, 3 yards, 70 yards. That's tough to call plays for a guy like that. But not only this year, it goes back to the last few years. Just running him up the middle, and I know he's scored, he's bounced him out. How in the championship game you can say, well, what if they took that? They just haven't used him creatively. They have not maximized his ceiling. It's unfortunate. There are plenty of players who he has a comparison to that you could look back. I just saw him talked about. Who was talking about him? I forget. I was watching some TikTok and they were saying, hey, who's the greatest football player pound for pound or something? And like I said, I forget who it was, but they were like Percy Harvin. Donovan Edwards has got some like Percy Harvin, that kind of skill set. Go back and watch what they did with Percy Harvin. But I don't know. That's it. May's mad, man. He's upset. Well, you're mad. You're mad. In the description, you're always mad. So that's it. Couple more here. Thomas says, what happened in previous years has nothing to do with this year's Michigan game. No quarterback, wide receiver, and offensive line. Well, I hear what you're saying about that. However, when Ohio State was on that, what was it? I don't know, a 16-year run against Michigan. When things were going, you were in the game and it was kind of even, and then things went a little bit south and you had some adversity from Michigan. Every Michigan fan, every Michigan player, and every Michigan coach said it had to think it, even if they weren't saying it. Every year's different, every game, every play, whatever. In the back of their head, they're saying this is over. Here we go again. So that's what I'm saying, Thomas. I get where you're at, where you're saying what happened in previous years has nothing. I would say mostly that's true, but there are the intangible things like what I'm talking about. Like Michigan plays kind of an even first quarter, and let's say the aforementioned Donovan Edwards blasts a 70-yard touchdown run. You pan around the Columbus crowd, and they're all there, and they're like, oh, no. That can have an effect the previous years. Scott says an upset of Ohio State would salvage the season. You're damn right it would. I've seen that play out. I've seen Michigan have very disappointing seasons and people crying and complaining, myself being right up there at the front, right with them all. And then Michigan beats Ohio State. I think of 95 and 96. Those two seasons were both disappointing. And then Michigan beat Ohio State, and it was great. So, yeah, that can happen. Vandy beat Alabama, so why couldn't it happen? Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think Vandy's a pretty good football team. Vandy's better. And so, but that's a good point. I'm not trying to really argue with you. I get that, but I would just say the Vandy's, shown it wasn't just like a once in a season type thing. Vandy has gone out there and they've played well in a lot of their other games. But if we look at the line, if you had to ask me right now, we don't know what Ohio State is playing Northwestern this week. I would think that Michigan to be like a 20-point favorite. Maybe that would be my guess right now if I had to handicap it. And Vandy was pretty close. They were at home against Bama, and it was an 18.5-point spread. So pretty close, but home, that helps, that kind of thing. Michigan should decline a bowl if they finish 6-6. Yeah, there's zero support. There would be zero support from me for that happening. You're not cutting off your nose because you're disappointed. You're not foregoing 15 practices that you get, even if they were playing in the Pop-Tart Bowl. You get 15 practices. And if you want to be, we're Michigan, we don't want to play in the Pop-Tart Bowl, well, then you don't get to practice. So teams that do that are stupid. And Michigan would be stupid to decline a bowl bid. Early Christmas present, if Michigan can pull off the upset against Ohio State, I'm with you on that. That's it. Let's do it. And, now people are kind of talking amongst themselves. Here's James talking about Connor Stallions. Yeah, I'll make it clear about my stance with Connor Stallions. Connor Stallions, I don't want Connor Stallions anywhere. I know that it's fun to say, he's a Michigan hero. Oh, boy, we really love him. This guy's a genius. I don't want Connor Stallions anywhere near the Michigan program. He's an embarrassment. Connor Stallions' best role. These high school teams are stupid to have him on. Connor Stallions' best role is in the stands cheering for his team that he loves. He's a super fan. He's an uber fan. And we see the danger when you bring some wide-eyed and, smart and everything, but when you get somebody too close to a football program, you don't want his hands anywhere near your program. He almost destroyed last year's season. And yet, I get people being cute. Like, we love Stallions. Not here. Not me. Not here. You like them. You want to talk about them and have fun. Go ahead. Not me. Ryan says he would rather be the worst new coach versus the worst experienced coach in the country in Florida State. Oof. Well, you're asking me if, do I want to die by, firing squad or lethal injection? Is that where we're at right now? Take the bowl bid. There you go, Smash. We all agree with that. Quickie Lane? Sure. Quickie Lane sounds fun. You could drive down Ford Field. That's nice. That's it. I don't think Johnny's talking about me. I'm not mad. Jeff, Miller Moss would be great if we get him. Very smart. He knows how to read a defense and his checkdowns. Yeah, as we sit here right now, I haven't seen, and neither of you, we don't know all of the different quarterbacks that could be available. We don't know how Michigan's going to do. We're going to talk about Bryce Underwood coming up. But I liked what I saw from Miller Moss at the Big House. I saw an NFL arm. I saw a guy making big-time plays with that arm. So, yeah, Miller Moss. If it's Miller Moss and that's it, in Michigan, it's going to be Miller Moss and Jadyn Davis next year for Michigan. Can I see a way where I feel like Michigan is going to be, back? Yeah, I'm going to have to see it a little bit there, but they could do worse than Moss. And it's not for anybody I'm not down on Moss. I'm just not thinking that, okay, oh yeah. The expectation is to make the college football playoff next year. And can Moss be that guy for Michigan? I think he can. See if there's a couple more in here if nobody else has jumped in. James has been watching Michigan since 71. He's seen some great games. And, that's a fun thing to do. James is go back, and if you're not enjoying this season and it's not a lot of fun, talking about this season. Going back and talking about other seasons is the way to go. Smash is talking about starting Jadyn Davis in the bowl game, and let's move on. Well, here's the thing about Jadyn Davis. Jadyn Davis doesn't appear to be ready. And so, you could say, wow, he's not even going to be ready for bowl preparation to get out there and see what he's got. That's not a bad idea. Now, remember, I told you a month ago, I ran into someone who's been at every Michigan practice, and I wasn't asking him specifically about Jadyn Davis and how he looked and everything. He just offered up this information, and he said Jadyn Davis is not ready to play college football right now. That if you watched him day in and day out, now look, he's just a true freshman, so things can change. But that was, what did I say, a month or two ago? I'd have to think about it, or whatever it was, a month or two ago. He could be a little bit better, but he was still throwing sidearm, and I'm not sure that he's going to be ready. That's not a bad idea, because I was thinking, well, what are you saying to any of these guys? A 6-6 season, we're playing to next year. It's I was going to say fun, but it's an interesting dynamic to think about. Because once it's over against Ohio State, and we're assuming that Michigan beats Northwestern, you just have the bowl season. And nobody wants to see any of the quarterbacks here that have been playing. The fans would want to. It's not just to placate the fans. But how about let's see what he's got? I mean, is this a kid that was scared to play as a freshman? Like some of the stuff that we talk, he didn't want to compete as a freshman. But I'm saying, somebody saying this guy's not ready to play college football. He's 6 feet tall, and yet he throws like a 5'7" quarterback. I mean, all of these things. Let's get him up on the horse and see what he can do. Very interesting thought from FK. And that sounds like I'm down on him. There have been plenty of guys that have been freshmen that have gone on. I think about it in basketball. I can remember watching Xavier Simpson as a freshman and getting the ball, and they're pressuring him full court, and he looked so scared. He was throwing the ball away. I mean, I thought this guy's not ever going to be able to play college basketball. He's way, and Xavier Simpson was a tremendous and a great asset for Michigan. And so it happens. I just wanted to say that because it sounds like I'm, totally down on Davis. I was just relaying what I heard from somebody who was actually at practice every day. Okay. Before we go to recruiting, two more. Rico asking if I had any thoughts about the U of M sideline and the body language vibes in the final 4 minutes of the IU game. The vibe from the Michigan sideline that I get is one of them being in over their head. And it's weird because part of, and I thought maybe the I don't know if it was the only thing, but it was one of the big things that was an attraction for Sharon Moore. It's a piece of being a head coach is how you run a sideline during a game and in big time situations, all the different things that you have to do. Challenges, calling timeouts. You have to relay back and forth with the booth. You get so many things you got to deal with. All of this in this pressure cooker. And Moore did it. I know he did it in the non-conference, I think it's BG, but what was it? Penn State, Maryland, going for it a bunch of times. And against Ohio State, I mean, nothing with the pressure of filling in with everything swirling around. He handled it. But these last two games, that guy from last year that was on the sideline handling everything, handling his business, to this year, he looks lost. And look, we all watch football where you watch guys that are in the Hall of Fame challenging things, and you're like, what are they doing? I think John Harbaugh last Thursday was the first series. And he's challenging some 2-yard play that, was down at the 5-yard line. That was stupid to do that. Wow, these guys. And in consecutive weeks, Sharon Moore was down there challenging things that, looked ridiculous to challenge. And then not calling a timeout. So, yeah, the body language should, I understand why it's poor. The worst situation, I don't know, let me see if the not calling the timeout, letting the 26, 28 seconds bleed off the clock that Sharon Moore did at the end of the game. I've never seen a coach botch a situation worse than that. I can't think of one. That was the most egregious coaching move or non-move that I've ever seen. And I know a lot of people are just like, hey, they kind of hung in there with Indiana defense. That was kind of nice. And it's fine. You want to just think about the positives. And, if Oregon didn't tack that one on, they stayed within the number against the Ducks. I am watching a coach look lost on the sideline, handle the game. So, yeah, the body language, I don't know about the final 4 minutes. I'm thinking about the last, 30 seconds. It's hard to hang in there when you have coaches that don't look like they know what they're doing. And look, I'll say all of that, and I'm not talking about, because there's a lot of people like, well, you'll fire him. I'm not saying that. I don't even think next year. I like to give a coach 3 years. Now, there's all kinds of circumstances. They go out and duplicate what they did this year, next year, well, there could be some tough calls. But for the most part, Rich Rodriguez got 3 years. I think Sharon Moore will be able to get 3 years. Let's see what he goes out and does in the offseason. Let's see how he handles recruiting. But he's been terrible. That's not me going overboard trying to slam someone. I want Michigan to win. I'm not a negative person. I'm a glass half full type guy. But I'm also, for the people that tune in here that want to know, hey, how do you think Sharon's done this year? Bad. Very bad. I've never seen a worse coaching job. But, hey, let's see what happens with these last 2 games, and then let's get to the offseason. Now let's go to the recruiting part. And here's Scott talking about Underwood, number 1 next year. Jadyn Davis is the back. Look, getting Bryce Underwood, I have to admit that when it comes down to the pursuit of Bryce Underwood, I think it's a shot in the dark, but also one that was worth taking. And so I am enjoying the pursuit, and I am just hopeful that they are able to get him and flip Bryce Underwood. It would feel like a big win. It would feel like a gigantic win for Sharon Moore and Michigan football if they're able to do that. Not just because they get Underwood, which is, the generational prodigy in your own backyard. I mean, that stands on its own. Also, what it just means, what he will bring with him. The offense that he'll bring with him, what Sharon Moore is going to have to do with all of the offense, and how much money that they're going to have to spend. It's kind of like you take your shot, maybe in high school, with the best looking girl in school, and she says yes. Next thing you know, you can not only are you going, you're going to have to buy a suit, you're going to have to rent a limo, you're going to have to do a lot of things. So, well, I'm just hanging in there to see what happens. I think the other good news is that Michigan now, because of this season, maybe they would have been playing it, and maybe they would have jumped in with everyone else in promising money up front. A complete departure of what they talked about under Harbaugh. But now, hey, things change fast, and here they are. Michigan's the one that's dropping bags. Michigan's paying for players. Michigan's NIL is going after 5 stars, and they're talking about transactions up front. And the latest good news is with this linebacker that I have up on the screen out of IMG. NOB, Nathaniel Owusu Boating. He is a 5-star, top 20 player in the country. Top linebacker in the country. And Michigan's right in the middle of it. Now he went to Notre Dame, who it was looked at. Notre Dame was looked at as this Michigan's biggest competition. But he went to Notre Dame over the weekend, and he came out of there where it doesn't seem like Notre Dame's the biggest competition anymore. But he's still going down to Texas. And in early December, he's going to make a decision. But Michigan, you could say, is the leader right now for NOB. And that's great. And if they don't get NOB, I think there's going to be a few more that are going to pop up. I'm just thinking and I don't know what's going to happen with Underwood. I think it's a shot in the dark, but one that, again, I think is willing to take. NOB, I'm not sure about him either, but if you're going for Underwood and you're going for NOB and you have this kind of cash, well, if you don't get those guys, well, let's go to the next 5-star. Let's throw some money at someone else. And I think that's the spot that they're in right now. They've got money to spend. And that's a good place to be. It's different. It's exciting. And it's a fun thing to follow. Season, not so much fun. Recruiting, dropping bags on 5 stars and getting the best players in the country, exciting. It's new. It's different. It's what's not to like? Don't worry about anybody that says, "Oh, wait, oh, for years you guys have talked about, yeah, it's different now. The game has changed. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. This is the name of the game now. Let's see, Michigan. We always wondered, I always talked about what it would be like if Michigan was dropping bags. Let's find out what it would be like. Because Michigan's got a gigantic bag full of money. And every time they say 5-star, they're unzipping it and showing it to them. I don't know how they'd go about it. That sounds like a lot of fun. Having the bag, opening it up. It's yours. Come on in. This is how we're playing ball now. Let's do it. So here's the thing that I wanted to say at the beginning of this podcast. For your state of mind, if you're down on Michigan and everything you look at is, oh, boo-hoo, pour yourself into recruiting. And soon into the portal. Those things are less than a month away. So, yeah, there's only, it's the middle of a bye week. Michigan has 2 more games. Recruiting is as hot as it's ever been. And then, the portal is going to be right there. You could change this thing around. In Michigan's position, I don't know about the coaching staff and everything else. I think there's going to be some changes. I don't think that's if I tell people I think that there's going to be some changes on the coaching staff, I think everybody's like, yeah, of course there's going to be. And then Michigan with the portal and then recruiting, they've got money to burn. So let's see. I mean, you got tons of money. I don't know exactly how much. What Ole Miss had 12, 13 million. Look at the spot that they're in. Ohio State had 20. No, Ohio State was recruiting. But now, this is what I'm expecting, that Michigan's going to have $10, $20 million that they're going to be throwing around. Now, I just made that up. Somebody says, you don't know. I've only heard it's 5. Whatever. Like I said, I just made that up. So, totally made up. A hypothetical guess at the money figure there. And, hey, they might be sitting around saying, yeah, we would love for it to be 25 million. Let's go. You want to follow everything that's going on in the portal, the depth chart of how things are going to unfold with the portal, how things are looking in recruiting, not just with NOB, not just with BU, but the other 5 stars that could be coming along. BU could be the Pied Piper who says NOB can't be that Pied Piper on defense, bringing along 5 stars with him. It could all happen. And what I'm telling you, for you to follow along and want to know what's going on right up until the minute accurately, well, the place to do all that is, you guessed it, the Maize and Blue Review. And you can get instant access right now. Go to michigan.rivals.com and let's see you get on in there. And let's talk about the portal and let's talk about recruiting. There it is. That's what's going on. And I'm going to take a few more on the feedback, and then I've got one other thing to do, and that could be, if you're still down about Michigan, I hear you. And we got a few opponents in here. And this is it. Talking about winning the championship last year. I enjoy other college football games, the NFL, winter sports, hockey and basketball, baseball. But I would trade all of that for just successful Michigan. Michigan's on top of all of that. So trying to tell people, so at least you've got the Lions. And it's true. I'm just saying there's other things. if you are not having fun watching Michigan football, again, recruiting portal. If you're not having fun there, maybe dive into basketball. Michigan's got a game on Friday. Hockey, you're a fan of hockey. And the other Lions. Look, I gave up on the Lions in the 90s. But everybody that I'm surrounded with or I'm friends with, these guys are probably just like you. They're the biggest Lions fans in the world, and everyone is just so fired up and enjoying. And I'm enjoying watching the games with them. And it's exciting. It's hard not to get sucked up and enjoy it. And I don't have anything against them. I want them to win. I am enjoying it. I'm just telling you that I feel like I'm not I can't be the flag bearer for the Lions since I gave up on them in the 90s, but I've watched them every single game and I don't root against them until they I should scratch that. I mean, I always rooted for them until they were out of it, and then it was like rooting for draft picks. And so there were more seasons that I rooted against them because they were out of it for draft picks, and that drives you crazy. And it's only been 1 year for Michigan, so they got to go ahead and turn this thing around. So you don't think about it being a Lions type situation. So that's it. That's where I'm at. I'll take a couple last feedback here and see where we are at. Scott, Scott's staying with the, this is the worst thing ever kind of vibe. Andres, people want to pile on. Can't put the lipstick on a pig. It's terrible. Self-evaluate and course correct going into next season. That's right. Get a bunch of different players, get a bunch of different coaches, and try it out. And might be about it. Shyrese is in here, and the clever Ohio State fans who I think it's a fun, cool, it's their thing. Like they can't put an M when talking about Michigan. Look, it doesn't matter what Shyrese, you end up doing with your life. Every time that any Michigan fans see you with your, the stupid X instead of Michigan, everybody looks at that instead of thinking like, oh, that's really cool or anything. They think these guys are the dumbest humans alive, and they deserve Ohio State. And the only thing that is right in line with them putting the X and the M is when any of their former players or coaches can't say, yeah, we're going up to play Michigan. And they have to say, we're going to play the team up north. That's as dumb as using the X on there. So you guys, you ne'er-do-wells, you guys continue to just, slam that moonshine and, sit around chewing tobacco and playing the lottery. Because I know you got that big game against Northwestern coming up next week. All right, that's going to do it here. I want to say that look forward to being with you on Friday for Good Afternoon Michigan Football. And then, I got somebody calling and wanting to make a deal in my fantasy league. Hold on. I'm going to call you right back in 5 minutes. Hang on. And then Michigan basketball is playing that night. So it's all good. Thanks so much for joining us. Smash that like button. Anytime you want to get in touch with this show, go ahead, leave some feedback. You can get at me on Twitter. And you can always leave a comment if you're listening to the podcast. And in fact, that helps out the show as much as anything. So go ahead and do that. Take care, everybody. Have a great Wednesday. So long.